everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is a little bit different video than what I typically would do, but at this time in our world that we're dealing with this coronavirus, this is I feel like much needed video. It is how to make the fabric masks that local, or at least our local hospitals are using and requesting. This is a pretty simple project. Go ahead and grab that sewing machine if you're like me. Mine's been put away for a little bit. I haven't sewn for a while, but this was the perfect time. We are stuck in the house. I feel like this is much needed since we have so many family and friends that are in the healthcare. And if this is a way that I could help them, it fills my time. So it's all worthwhile. You'll need just a couple different things. I have already pre-cut the flannel and the double woven cotton fabric. So here I've got just a piece of flannel. This was a scrap piece and I've cut it. You will cut both your flannel and your cotton a 6 by 9 inch rectangle. So I've already got a bunch of these pre-cut. You will also need some elastic. Here I've got some 1/8 inch elastic. I also have some 1/4 inch elastic. The elastic needs to be cut into 6.5 inch long pieces. If you have rope elastic, you will need to cut it at 7 inches long and then tie a knot at each end. For each mask, you will need 2 pieces of elastic, and that's it. You've got your 2 pieces of fabric and your 2 pieces of elastic. Let's go ahead and start sewing this together. So your first step, you will want to determine the right sides of your fabric. The right sides of the fabric are typically brighter, bolder in color, and the wrong sides are more dull and faded in color. You will then take your 2 pieces of fabric and put them right side together. So both of the right sides of the fabric will be facing each other. Go ahead and line up the edges as best as you can, and you will notice here that the right sides are together, and we will get started. We will be sewing this together, but leaving a small portion unsewn so that we can flip the mask inside out and have a nice clean edge. So I typically start about midway on one of the longer edges, the 9 inch edge, and I start sewing until you reach the corner. At the corner, I will stop, make sure that the needle is still down, rotate the fabric to where I will be sewing on the shorter 6 inch side now. Grab one of your pieces of elastic, flip open the pieces of fabric, put the elastic in, fold back over your pieces of fabric, and continue sewing. I typically like to reverse it and make sure I have several stitches over parts of the elastic to make sure that it stays in place. And then go ahead and finish sewing the short side. Once you reach the other corner, you will keep the needle down, flip up the pressure foot, grab the elastic, keeping it as flat as possible so that the elastic isn't twisted, and then put it in place at the corner of the fabric. This gets a little tough because the elastic is pulling. Just do the best you can in keeping it in place as you continue to sew. And once again, you will notice I go over it a couple different times just to make sure I have a good hold on that elastic. Once again, keep the needle down, lift up the pressure foot, and this time you will want to make sure you kind of pull the elastic to the left to make sure that as you sew the long edge, the elastic band does not get caught up in it. From here, you will just continue to sew along the long edge, and once we reach the other short edge, we will repeat the steps that we just did, adding in the elastic. Once again, you will keep the needle down, lift up your pressure foot, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult this time because you've got a lot more of the mask sewn together, but you need to lift up the top piece of fabric, kind of slide the elastic into place. Sometimes you kind of have to work it between the 2 layers. And once you get the elastic in place and it is flat, go ahead and sew it in place. Once again, I sew it and then reverse it to make sure I have several stitches in there to make sure the elastic isn't going anywhere. I want to make sure and mention, if you use the rope elastic with the knots at each end, I have found that if you don't put the knot right on the seam and make sure you leave probably like a 1/4 inch of space between the seam that you sew and where the knot is, that helps a lot better whenever you turn the mask inside out and you do another sew around the edge. On the plus side, when you use the rope elastic, it doesn't pull as much when you are trying to do the second sew on the elastic on the second corner. It tends to be a little bit easier and not pull as much, so you can get into place a whole lot easier than you can the 1/4 inch or even 1/8 inch elastic. For the final part of this initial sew, you will want to start sewing down the long edge again, but don't go all the way to where you started. Make sure you leave anywhere between 1.5 inches and 2 inches of a space so that you can turn the mask inside out. As you can see, the opening that I left is about 1.5 inches wide. If you go a little bit wider, it is easier to turn inside out, but I try to keep it small so it's less of an opening whenever I turn it inside out and sew it back together. To get the mask turned inside out, I start by putting 2 fingers, usually my 2 index fingers, and get a little bit of fabric out, and from there you will just start pinching and pulling it. Once you do get one side out, especially if you can get a piece of that elastic and gently tug on it, that half of the mask comes out very well, and then the other half comes out a whole lot quicker. From here, I will just kind of gently tug at the elastic to try to get the corners as nice and neat as I can. For this next part, you will need pins, sewing clips. I personally prefer binder clips as they are a bit stronger, I feel like. So starting at the opening that you had where you turned the mask inside out, go ahead and make sure you tuck both sides of the fabric in so that when you sew, you are getting both of the fabrics together. I take a binder clip and I just clip that so the fabric does not move. Next, we will move on to the tucks. This can be confusing at first, but you'll quickly get the hang of it. I always put the outside fabric, the cotton fabric, towards me, and you'll just kind of pinch and fold. A trick that I learned is if on one side you fold to the left, when we get to the other side, you'll fold it to the right, because you want to make sure that your tucks go the same direction across the mask. I put in 3 tucks on each side of the mask, and I use 2 clips to keep those in place. Once again, you can use pins and pin on each tuck. So when you flip the mask over, remember, we went on the left the first time, so this time you're going to go to the right. Continue folding or making the tucks until you have 3 on this side of the mask as well, clipping as you go along. If you can't get 3 tucks in each side of the mask, you can do 2 tucks. It gets to be a little tight with 3, but 2 is doable as well. Now that we have both sides of the mask tucked, you can lay it flat and see the folds and make sure that they are going the same way. So as you can see, they're kind of folded in the downward position as the mask is laying flat here. When I sew the outside of the mask, I do move the needle over to where it's sewing at 1/8 of an inch instead of a 1/4 of an inch from the edge. Now take your mask. I usually start on the side right above where my opening is, and you're going to follow the outside of the mask, sewing either 1/4 or, as I do, 1/8 of an inch from the edge. As you near the corner, I will start removing the clips so I have a little bit more room for the pressure foot. Get to the edge, the corner, and keep the needle down, lift up the pressure foot, rotate the mask, Put the pressure foot back down and continue sewing through all of the tusk. The tension will be very tight as you sew through the tusk, so just be aware you may have to adjust the tension setting on your machine. Continue sewing the other sides of the mask, being cautious when you get to the shorter side this time around because you will be sewing against the tucks and they kind of like to get out of place. To finish off the last bit of stitching this first time around, I meet the initial stitch and then I backstitch just to make sure that everything stays in place. On the mask that I made, I did like to go around a second time, making another 1/8 stitch from the first stitch just to make sure that the tucks stay in place and the mask stays together. This is completely optional. You can just go around one time. Here I like to give the mask one more look to make sure I have the tucks the right way and to make sure I don't have any loose strings or any stitches out of place. You will notice the tucks expand in the middle to go over the mask and the mouth and nose part. And here you have it, a fabric mask that can be utilized by your healthcare workers, whether it's in the hospital, nursing home, veterans home, anybody who comes into contact with people. This is nice for them to have around. They can put it over their mask as there is a shortage of those, and then wash these and reuse them. As you can see, I have several here that I've been working on. I plan on donating these to the local healthcare workers, whether they be family or friends locally, and then once they have a decent amount of masks, I do plan on donating any of them made after that to our local hospitals. I hope you found this video useful, helpful in making the mask and maybe utilizing your time while we're all stuck indoors. If you could, make sure to give the video a thumbs up, share it with all of your family and friends. I know there's been several people wanting directions and the pattern for these masks. This will be a nice visual they can go by, as well as looking up the written instructions. I hope you all are staying safe and healthy out there. And until next time, we will catch you later. Bye.